I see some of my compadres here. So if I haven't met you before, my name is Francis. And this session is actually about preparing a prep plan if you're looking at doing certification exams. So this ought to be a little bit more light than what Joe was talking about, but hopefully you'll pick up a thing or two here if you're looking at certification exams. So a little bit about me. I've been with VMware just over 5 years now. I'm currently a product architect in the VMware Cloud Infrastructure Business Group for the product management. So I actually work with some of our large scale clients on the VMware Cloud platform. So VMware Cloud on AWS, OCVS, AWS, GCPE, all the acronyms for basically the VMware stack on the hyperscalers. So there's just a little information about myself here. I've been with VMware 5 years. This is my 5th role. So I've moved around a little bit. I've had a lot of fun. I think I've met a number of you out in the field when I was working with customers. So the last couple of years, I've actually spent a lot of time working on the exams. So I have written a number of the VMware exams. I've actually also done some of the AWS exams. So this is a very familiar territory for me. I myself take a lot of the exams. I do not pass everyone. So just be clear that I'm nothing special in that space, but I do have a little bit of information about how I have studied over the years, as well as how the exams are written. So hopefully you'll be able to pick up 1 or 2 tips here that you can use to in your journey for certifications. And most of what I'm going to talk about is pretty generic, because I've taken everything from Microsoft exams to back in the day, Sun Microsystem exams, all kinds of exams to our present day. But I'm going to talk primarily about what the exams look like today. All right. So these are methods that I've kind of developed over the years, because I've been taking exams for over 15 years now myself, and I only started developing some of them in the last couple of years. So it gives me really great insight on the mind of creating these exams and where we're coming from, versus from a studying standpoint, what content to really spend time on. So I really break it out in 3 different areas. One is planning. 85% of the work that you're going to do is going to be in planning. And then there's the actual pace, the time that you spend in learning the material. And there are some good tricks to this. And the last piece really is from a motivation and inspiration standpoint. How do you hold yourself accountable? Because I am horrible at this. I will let things slip for a long while, because I just, rather do other things, right? So hopefully there's some tips here. All right, so let's jump into this. From a planning standpoint, there are really 3 things that I do in planning, and that is, I've got to gather information. We want to be very, very strategic about our time. Our time is very precious, and time passes very quick when you're trying to study for these certifications and you've got a full-time job, you're managing your family and whatnot. So this is not a talk about how to learn a topic. This is geared specifically toward the exams. So we're going to narrow down the focus, gather information first. So let's jump into it. The first thing I really look at nowadays, if you're looking at an exam, is to pull the exam blueprint up. Now, this is really, really important because, for example, this one here is NSXT. NSX is a really, really big product. Lots of areas to explore. But if you're doing a certification, you don't need to boil the ocean when it comes to NSX. You just need to focus on what's on the exam blueprint. This is going to be true for various vendor certifications as well. Just focus on the content that you need to learn at hand. So there's an art to reading this blueprint, by the way. I get really, really surgically precise on what I look at on these exam blueprints. So I've highlighted here, as you read through the blueprint, you'll notice for this particular one, there's no testable objectives for that section. So there's no need for you to dive into architecture and the technologies and memorize and try and remember that information. Stick to the sections where they have the objectives called out. And those are the ones that you want to look for information for. Now, there's one thing that I do tend to do, and that is I will print the blueprint up on a piece of paper. And as I go through the material, I will write on that blueprint next to the objective, the information that I'm learning. That's how I initially created the NSX study guide. I took that blueprint out. I just started writing on my little chicken scratch notes on the side. And then I pretty much just transcribed those notes onto my study guide. And that's what I think a few people have used in the past here. Next thing, here's a little topic that I want you to think a little bit about. Some of these exam blueprints have sample questions. Truthfully, some of these are the rejects, right? But it gives you some idea, the frame of mind that the folks writing the exam are in when they're developing these questions. So it allows you to take a look at the content as you're studying it and ask yourself, okay, if I was going to ask a question on this topic, how would I ask that? And what information do I need to understand about the topic in order to answer that question and have that knowledge? So the questions are not only from oh, this is, topic that they're going to ask you about. Look at how they're crafting the question. It's pretty precise. I can tell you from some of my experience, a lot of debate goes into how these are crafted to be very mindful of the test taker in mind. All right. The last section of the exam blueprint is going to be the references. Now, this is very important because the content will be mostly based on the reference material. Not all, but it's pretty much you can study these particular references and they will cover all the topics in the exam. Now, I know some of you looking at this and saying, you have docs.vmware.com. That's huge. That's like boiling the ocean. And yeah, it's listed there from a reference standpoint. But if you refer back to the objectives, you'll realize the only pieces inside, say, docs.vmware.com that you really need to spend time with is the listed objective. So don't boil the ocean when it comes to docs.vmware.com for that particular exam. Just look up those objectives and read those pieces that are related to the topic. And then I'll talk a little bit about blogs here in the everything else category. Anyone have questions? All right, so I talked a little bit about doing this plan first. One of the things that has emerged in the last, I would say 5 to 6 years, and I know a number of you probably already know this, is some of the exams like VMware require that you take a course. Now the courses are they're great. They're developed really well, and they do cover the lion's share of the material when it comes to the certification. But you want to be careful because as you look at the certification, you want to make sure that you take one of the required training courses. If you're required to take the course, don't take the wrong one. I've made that mistake, by the way. Like, yeah, sure, this should do it. Whoops. And then you got to take it again. So take a look at that exam, look on the website for that vendor, make sure you're taking the right course. Now, I highlighted a few things here, and these are my preferences, right? So if you looked at the certification, it's going to tell you which one of the training courses to take. The exam blueprint sometimes will have some of that information. But the first one here is going to be the NSXT data center install, configure, and manage. And there's 2 lines down, there's the on-demand version. And I highlight that, but because for myself, I prefer the on-demand classes because the ICM class, if you take it live, even if it's virtual, it is going to be a committed time. It's going to be a committed number of hours for that week. And with VMware, you'll have a lab environment for that particular week. But if something happens that week, you get busy, whatnot, you will lose that time in that class. Versus, say, the on-demand class for VMware is it's good for about 30 days, which gives you a full month, and they're online videos. So one of the things I like to do with the videos, because sometimes, you think you're paying attention, you're listening, 10 minutes goes by, you realize, I did not hear what they said. I will go back on the video, scrub it, and play it again. There are moments where I find myself not paying attention. I will scrub that thing 5 times before I understand. And that helps sometimes with understanding concepts too, especially concepts that are new to me. It takes me a couple of tries at listening and trying to ingest the information to understand what they're saying. So having the on-demand video and allowing myself to go back is very useful from a learning standpoint. The second thing about the on-demand portion that I like is the fact that if you're covering material that you are already familiar with, you can watch it at 2x, and that's going to make it significantly faster. So you can kind of skip over the pieces. I think everybody knows that, but not everybody talks about, let me go play that one more time to understand concept. The third thing that I like about the on-demand class is the lab. The lab is not there for just 1 week. It is there for that entire time you are entitled to that on-demand class. That means if you get derailed during the day for 4 hours, you can come back in the evening and still work on that lab. I like to go through all the videos and then switch gears and do the labs and spend time, actually take my time going through the labs, through the interface, and carefully taking my time through the lab steps. I find that when I do that in person in the class, I'm kind of rushing through that exercise of the labs. And so I find that to be more useful for myself. Okay. Before I move on, do not schedule your class until you have completed your plan. Okay, because you'll find that you may schedule a class and then maybe you're going on vacation the week before, you're going on vacation the week after, your kid, you need to take your kid to a field trip, whatnot. Things happen. So you want to plan around that. Okay. So the last section for actually gathering data is what I call everything else. And I love this scene from the movie Once Upon a Time in Venice, where Bruce Willis is asking the thug played by Jason Momoa where Jason Momoa's girlfriend is, because she stole his dog. And Jason Momoa's character actually says to him, "Google it, Holmes." I just find that really, really funny. But yes, if there is a topic or an objective on the exam blueprint where it's not in the course material, but they reference it, then you definitely want to look that up. But do we want to look at every random blog? No. We want to be really, really specific about where you get that information from. Vendor blogs, vendor white papers, vendor reference documentation. Okay, so let's be really, really specific, because if it doesn't come from the vendor, that's not going to be a legitimate source of information, unfortunately. It could be useful from a day-to-day standpoint, but when you're going through an exam and they're testing you on material, you need to draw from the official vendor documentation. Now, for non-vendor based training, like when I did my AWS SA, I absolutely loved A Cloud Guru. They did a fantastic job in terms of practice and taking me through the interface. So there's great trainings available. Also, and this is from the community that clued me in, obviously, we know on the VMware side, there's hands-on labs, but Cisco has labs. NetApp has an emulator, right? So there, and AWS and Azure and OCB, they all have free tiers of their services. So it's a great option to just get some hands-on stick time, as we call it, with the product. And you should absolutely utilize that because that really helps reinforce the material and it gives the material more meaning. Just going through videos and going through documentation can be very dry and very boring. But when you go through the interface and you actually work with the product, it really helps solidify that knowledge and understanding in your brain. So hopefully those are some good places to go to for that. All right. We've gathered all the information. Like I said, that's why I spend a lot of time actually talking about the planning. Now you've got to plot it. When I say plot it, I mean take out a calendar and figure out how you're going to tackle the material. And you start back from some deadline point. Perhaps you're getting the certification because for job performance, you have to get a certification. Maybe you're looking at transitioning to a brother field and you need to demonstrate knowledge in that area. That's why you're going for that certification. Perhaps it's you need to have that certification or a higher level certification for performance, for promotion, right? So take those dates and put them on a calendar. So you know you can work back from that date. Now, say it's 3 months from now, you've got events, kids, vacation, downtime, whatnot. You got to put them down because those are the major events that's going to derail you mentally, really, from the learning curriculum that you're going to set up for yourself. Now that you've got your date, what you're running tired, you're planning around your personal life, go take a look at that course calendar. You realize there's now some blocks where you probably cannot take that course, right? So plan around it. Which month you want to take the on-demand courses, one that you know you're going to be home, or versus you're going to do an in-person one, probably should do that after a vacation, whatnot. So these are things that from a long-range standpoint, from a month to month and week to week, you should take a look at. So the next thing, I go down and I go all the way down to the very granular level because you need reinforcement. Which of these objectives are you going to cover material-wise on a weekly basis? You've got to hold yourself accountable. You've got to write it down and say, okay, I'm going to finish the first 3 modules in the next 2 weeks. Put it down, write it down, remind yourself, right? And sometimes, you know, this is for folks who are really serving their OCD here. Put some time on your calendar, block it out. Make yourself busy. And if people want that time, they got to ask you to book over that time. Make a commitment to yourself, to give yourself the time to spend time on the material to learn, because that's going to be important. All right. So all of that is to say, once you've created your calendar setup, expect that you're going to get knocked off course. I do all the time. Things come up, emergencies, water heater buses, whatever. I think we've all been in that scenario. But you have to realize here, once you've planned it, you probably have some buffer time in there for studying. All right, so that's your plan. That's how I usually do it. I fall off the wagon all the time, but having a system like this puts me back on course relatively quickly. Now, for actually spending time with the material, I'm actually going to go through a couple of books that I read that I picked up really good tips on and share those with you. So my first one is a couple of years ago, I read a book by Peter Brown. It's called Make It Stick. Great book about learning as an adult. Yeah, it works for the kids. Don't get me wrong. The kids get a lot of repetition, but as an adult, how do you remember things, right? And really the short version in terms of the highlights here is you've got to test yourself repeatedly. So the way I do this is I used to, you know, when I first started, I used index cards, just tried and true, you know, college method. Nowadays, I actually use Quizlets. So I have a blog, Virtually 2 Cents. If you go on the blog, you'll find I've got a section that's called Fun Facts. Basically, things I come up with that I read that I find interesting, I put it into Quizlet. And Quizlet is the digital version of index cards. And I can tell you right now, I did one for NSXT when I was doing that course. Right now, I'm doing the VCP-DCB. So I'll probably share that online as well. So you'll get access to that. But that is a great way to not only remember the content, but test yourself. That is how you will remember the content. You have to test yourself, you got mixed up, and you have to do it every couple of days, at least on a weekly basis, to keep it fresh in your mind. Oftentimes, these certifications, they encompass a lot of content. It takes a long time to try and digest all of that information. So in order to keep it fresh in your head, before you move on to a next subject, test yourself, right? Remind yourself on a weekly basis. And obviously, before you take the exam, go back through that material to make sure you're recalling that information sufficiently. I recently read this one. This is a pretty new one, Atomic Habits. If you've never heard of this book, fantastic book. And some of the quotes here really pretty much cover some of the habits that we have that derail our success, and some of the habits that really put you on the path to success. And so he loves to say here, he's very commonly quoted, that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So what is your system for learning? All right. So do you spend the time? Are you the kind of person that's going to look something up? I love to listen to things like what Joe just went through, because he just inspired me to take a look at the APIs, because apparently they're much more performant than Power CLI. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. So do you take educational sessions like this through VMUG from time to time? Because these are the things that add to your knowledge and add to who you are and who you want to become. So this is a great book. I highly recommend it. Help you develop some good habits. All right. And this is my last section. This is a hard one for me. How do you hold yourself accountable? And when I was doing one of my exams, I actually took a look at this, because everybody learns different and everybody is motivated differently. And what I find is, if you're an introvert, you're probably not going to tell a lot of people, or you don't talk to a lot of people about what you're up to. But as that kind of person, perhaps if you tell one person that you talk to, maybe on a weekly basis, that you're doing this, it just gives you just enough motivation and reminder that this is what you're focusing on. Now, for extroverts, I do something different. I will oftentimes create a study group with probably my current work colleagues and whatnot. And I'll put a weekly hour on, and I pick someone that has maybe expertise in the subject that I'm studying on, so that there's an expert that I can ask questions on. And then the rest of the group is also folks that are like me, learning the material. And we go through the material, I don't know, section or objective at a time together. And if you're an extrovert, you'll get energy from that activity, and it will help reinforce your study and progress. The last section here, and this is for you brave folks here. Put on your work goal. That's something that's gonna make, that's a deadline, and that's a hard stop, right? So some of you, that's what works for you. More power to you. Okay. All right. So for me, from a plan standpoint, if you were going after a certification, what are you going to do? You're going to make a massive plan to hold yourself accountable. You're going to map out all the things you have to do, and you're going to pull all that data up. You're going to spend time to learn it, all the different tricks that you've got to spend time with in terms of like Quizlets and reading, revisiting, rewatching the videos, whatnot, and then you got to own it. So I think I kept it pretty tight, and that's all I got. So if there are questions, I'd love to take it.
That was awesome. Thanks, Francis. Anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Could we get a copy of the deck to share with our teams?
Oh yeah, sure. I'll send it over to Ben.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Once I get it, I can I'll post it in the NJVMUG workspace, and you'll all be able to download it from there.
Yeah, and let me know if you have questions about any of the VMware exams. I write a bunch of them, and I alpha test them too.
Yeah, I need to recertify. The last one I got was VCP 2019, so I probably have to take a course again.
Yes, and I have to admit something, that in all the craziness that we've been through this last couple of years, I totally blanked on my VCP. So I have to take it over again. That's why I'm doing the exam blueprint for vSphere 7 right now, because I have to do it because I forgot to take my course last year to renew my certification. So, you know, I'm in the same boat with everybody else in terms of that. So right there with you.
Yeah, I know that the VMware IT Academy has some classes at different community colleges around that. If anyone's looking to recertify, you need to take a class, and you're paying out of your own pocket, and your company's not paying, you can. These community colleges have online classes, and they're a lot cheaper. So I know there's Stanley Community College down in North Carolina is one of the most popular ones, and you know, a lot of people use them, so it's good stuff.
Oh, Nick, you have to do yours too. Call me Nick, because I'm working on the blueprint right now.
We should talk then. Yeah,
yeah, we should.
I just need to find more time in my day.
You know, look up that Atomic Habits, because let me tell you, I had that same problem. And so developing good habits actually allowed me to complete the course in under 60 days with all the changes going on with me. So the exam blueprint, I'm literally transcribing it right now for y'all. So once I'm done, I'll be up.
Appreciate the recommendation.
Nick, if you find any extra hours, send them over this way.
I will do that, Joe. Happy to share the extras.
I know in the past I've used you know, with Office 365, there's like a summary of I forget exactly what the email is called, but it's like a summary of what you've worked on and stuff, and there's it'll recommend injecting focus time into your calendar, and it'll block time on your calendar to do, you know, things that you want to do that you might not have time for if you leave your calendar open and have it start filling up.
Yeah, I think it's called Microsoft Insights now.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it makes recommendations on, and you can pick and choose which ones you want it to inject, and it was I found it helpful in the past.
Yeah, I do as well. I will block off an hour and literally make people ask to book over that time, because it's time that you got to give back to yourself. So it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours, but try it out, try different things, try it at different times too. So it's not always at the same time. For me, I got to mix it. I got to mix it up, because after a little while, I find that I'm not paying attention to my own calendar.
Yeah, I hear you. But even if you don't use that, just manually blocking off time on your calendar to do things like study and stuff is big, especially if you're in your personal life, you don't really have time outside of working hours, which you know, sometimes happens. So anyway, good stuff. Thank you, Francis.